everybody. This is the week of February the 2nd. We have moved into a new curriculum section in our Gospel Project book. So we are going to be on Unit 18, Session 1, and our lesson this week is about Esther. The kind of overarching picture in this section is that God doesn't waste pain. The passage that is our key passage, kind of that key verse that all of these lessons will tie back to, is 1 Peter 5, verse 10. Let me flip over there right fast and I'll read it to you because it is just such a beautiful verse. It says, "And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." So that is kind of what the theme of what we're looking for in these stories in scripture. So the beginning of our story of Esther, we see a lot of suffering. She has lost her family, and so she is an orphan, and her cousin Mordecai takes her in and begins to raise her. That is a lot of loss. That is a lot of suffering. That is a lot of really hard, difficult seasons to walk through. And that's where we find Esther. Well, there has been an incident with the king and his wife, and she is no longer queen. I wish we had time to talk all about that. There's so many different angles we can talk about from the book of Esther, but we're specifically going to focus on how God used her to save his people. So the king is without a queen, and so he has his guards round up all of the eligible maidens in the kingdom and bring them to him. He has them go through a crazy series of beauty rituals, and then they are presented before the king. When we talk about suffering, Esther really is an example of that to me, because she's gone through so many things that she has zero control over. She did not have any control over her family. She didn't have any control over her living situation. She didn't get asked if she was interested in coming to visit the king, if she even wanted to pursue that. All of these things are happening that are completely out of her control, that completely are a picture of suffering. And so there is a man who works for the king. His name is Haman, and he is like his right-hand man. Well, Haman is a man who is very evil, and he's very jealous, and he's very self-centered. And so he has this plot to destroy Mordecai, because Mordecai is a man of great faith and of great character, and Mordecai reveals this plan of a plot to kill the king. Well, the king wants to reward him. Well, when Haman realizes that it's Mordecai he wants to reward, he is furious, because he's been wanting Mordecai to bow down to him. And Mordecai refuses, because he says he will only bow before his God and his king. And Haman is none of those things. And so Haman is actually a descendant of Agag. Now, if you'll remember way further back in the Old Testament, there was a period of time where Agag's descendants were all supposed to be wiped out. It was a picture of sin and the way that they were dealing. And God instructed for them all to be wiped out. Well, they didn't. They let the queen go, and she was pregnant. And so this lineage continued. And Haman, the next time we see him and this lineage on the scene, is causing trouble, really going after and attacking. Which y'all, that'll preach all on its own, right? But so Haman finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, and he decides to go after them. So he goes and he tricks the king into passing this law that says they cannot worship another god, and if they are a Jew, that they will wipe them out on a certain day, that they are going to come and pillage their villages, kill them, capture them, destroy God's people. So Mordecai hears about this, and he sends word to Esther, who's the queen, And he says, you have to go and talk to the king. And Esther says, I can't do that. I'm too afraid. That breaks all the rules. I can't go in uninvited. And Mordecai tells her probably one of the most famous lines from her story is that perhaps you were created for such a time as this. This is the reason why all of these things have happened. And if you don't, that's your choice, but God will provide deliverance from somewhere else. And so Esther says, have everyone fast. I'm going to have myself, all my maidens, everyone fast for 3 days. And we're going to call upon the Lord for strength for me, for his intervention in this situation. And so that happens. Esther gets up, washes her face, and goes before the king. Now the king can decide if he either wants to have her put to death or if he will listen to her. Now these are the same people that had been there whenever Vashti didn't do what he wanted her to do. And so there is incredible pressure from all the people surrounding him to put her in her place. But God intervenes and softens his heart towards Esther, and he listens to her. She invites him over, and through a series of things, she reveals Haman's plot. And God provides deliverance for the Jews. So all of that is to say that God is always working on our behalf, and we don't want to miss that. Sometimes we can get so overwhelmed with our circumstances and the toughness and the worry and just the overwhelmingness of life that we can miss seeing how God is working. We can miss seeing those opportunities that he created for us to do good works. We can miss the purposes that he has for us. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to recognize that after Esther really sought God's face, then she was able to do what God had called her to do. She found that strength of the Lord. She found that, not saying, I mean, I'm sure when she went, her armpits were sweaty and she was shaking and she was afraid, but she could step out and step out while she was afraid to do what she needed to do to save and rescue her people and herself, because she would have been killed alongside that. So that is kind of the main point that we want to teach our kids is how can we be open to seeing how God is working through those tough times? How can we see how after we've suffered for a little while, God's going to restore us? Of course, we have the hope of heaven. And at the end of this life, or if Jesus returns, those of us who have trusted in him, we have the hope of heaven where all of those things will be made right. But also on the earth, how is he working on our behalf? How is he providing for us in those situations? Even if those situations aren't immediately made right, there wasn't an immediate, everything was perfect. She still had to face those hard things. She still had to, walk through that scary door to go into the king. She still had to face that tough stuff. There was still the pressure from Haman. I mean, all of it's not like a genie in a lamp where it's like a wish and God just makes everything perfect all the time. But she found through the strength of the Lord how to face those things. And that's what we want to recognize in our lives and in our kids' lives, is that God doesn't just sit back and watch us, but he is constantly working on our behalf. So there are some games in here for you to play. I will tell you that option 2, the cup phone game, I have tried that multiple times, and it is very hard to get it to actually work because you have to get that string super, super tight for it to work, for the sound to transfer. So I would probably go with option 1 in that. And do some kind of something about the messages, because there's several different instances in this passage where messages are sent back and forth. And then, of course, you have the main point in the Christ connection on page 162 is that God is in control. And yes, there is an enemy who is working against us, but God is bigger and God is stronger and God will prevail. no matter what, that is a truth, a promise. You can take that to the bank. And that is the message that we want to send to them. I hope that this week, as you spend some time in Esther, it blesses you. Thank you for hanging with me. I know that there's a lot. There's just so much good stuff in this book. So I hope you know how incredibly important that the work that you do is. You are doing more than just, showing up and watching, kids, keeping them out of trouble. You are sharing with them the lifelong truths that they will carry with them forever. You are showing them and modeling for them what a life lived in service is. And you are investing in them. I will never forget the women and men even who sat with me and taught me how to follow God. And that's what we're doing now. So I pray that this time blesses you. I pray that you always know how much you're loved and appreciated. So look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Have a fantastic weekend.